everyone. It's great to be here with you live. And I wanted to talk about tending to your own health as a practitioner. And why is this important? Well, it's important for several reasons. As a practitioner in the field of holistic health, integrative nutrition, we do pretty deep work with people, probably more than the average practitioner out there in the field of medicine in general. So that depth of work can be really emotionally draining at times. So we definitely need to be thinking about this and how we're going to maintain doing this work for 20, 30, 40 years even. If you're just starting out in your 20s, if this is something you see doing, the rest of your life. Um, Also, some of the other challenges that come with private practice is you're often working alone. It might be your first time being your own boss and making your own schedule, and that can feel daunting and overwhelming. Um, Now, long ago, back in the year 2000, when I worked at Smile Herb Shop as part of my journey to becoming an herbalist and nutritionist, my colleague who worked there at the time, Claudia Joy Wingo, she would say to potential employees, we'd have people come who shopped there that just loved Smile Herb Shop and all it represented, the jars of herbs, the supplements, um, the books, and they would want to get a job there. And Claudia used to say to them, working here is not all butterflies and rainbows. And that's kind of how it is once you get into the field of integrative nutrition. We're often attracted to this work because we've had a healing experience in our own life. We've worked with a practitioner that made a difference in our own life. And we have big visions about how we want to help people, help our community heal using food and natural remedies. But the fact of the matter is, being on this end of things is very different. Being on this end of the practitioner client relationship is a very different experience than our own healing journey. So sometimes that's a rude awakening when we start our practice, when we find out, is this something I really want to do? So I think there's some great ways to maintain balance from the get-go. And I'm always into sharing my own experience of my own challenges and what I've learned so that you, starting off, can not make the same mistakes and, maybe figure it out faster and sooner so that you can have good work-life balance and really, you know, have ease of being in this work moving forward. So number one, there's a couple principles I came up with. And number one is the classic saying, put your own oxygen mask on first. Because if we're suffering for oxygen, we're not going to be able to get it on our child or whoever else we're caring for. To use a biblical quote, my cup runneth over. So it's that, like, if our tank is empty, we have very little that we're going to be able to give other people. So we have to fill up our own tank in order to do this work that we do, because it is in-depth work and it does require us to feel nurtured ourselves. So what are some signs that your tank is empty? Well, maybe you have difficulty getting up in the morning, or you feel like quitting or giving up. Maybe you're not getting good sleep. You feel tired or depressed. Maybe your tolerance for stress has decreased and you feel a little more edgy or irritable. One that shows up for me is that I can't laugh at myself easily. Like if somebody makes a joke, if my tank's full, I can laugh at myself. Or I might take a comment from a client personally. Maybe they choose to go in a different direction and I take that personally. Or, you find yourself, thinking negative thoughts about clients or just dreading talking to people. Those are all signs that your tank is probably empty. So first, it's good to be aware of that, and then to make an action plan of what you need to do to nourish yourself so that you can be present fully in the way that you want to in your practice. And then number two principle is to reinvest in your own health. When I first started off in my early clinical practice, I had an acupuncturist who recommended that I spend a significant portion of my early earnings on my own health. I somewhat disregarded that recommendation because it did not seem financially sound to me. I was going to cut my profit margin way too much if I spent 25% of my earnings investing in my own health. But I do think that there's a lot of wisdom in this concept of reinvesting in our own health. Um, we are tending other people, and so we need to tend ourselves. Um, Often we're the practitioner, so we also need to be the client. Like, we need to have other people in our lives who are that person for us, since we're doing that for other people. Now, when it comes to like taking care of our own health, I don't want this to be misconstrued. Sometimes we feel, or people feel in our field, that we need to somehow be a certain level of health before we can help other people. There's this fallacy that we can attain perfect health, and it might be really subconscious or not even verbalized in that manner, but it kind of runs a current in our communities. That I remember when I worked as nutrition director, the director of the Master of Science in Nutrition program at MUIH. I remember when I used to go to the lunch cafeteria to get lunch, and when I was walking back up to my office, I felt like everybody was looking at what I was eating because I was the director of the nutrition program, so they wanted to check it out. It's kind of that same thing, that we've got to live up to a certain standard. Um, the thing is, we are never going to have perfect health. All of us have health concerns. And our health concerns, whatever they might be, whether we're able to heal or not heal, or maybe partially heal, that doesn't make us a better or worse practitioner. So just because you're dealing with a health concern doesn't mean you can't be a practitioner or you can't be a good practitioner. I also often tell the story of a good friend of mine who's a psychotherapist and herbalist who was working in a setting. She was dealing with Lyme disease, and she was using a cane while she was recovering. And the owner of the practice said, please don't go out into the waiting room or on the floor, when you're using that cane, because it just sends a bad message. I mean, that's really, not the kind of philosophy that we want to practice, because people of all, our health does not reflect on our ability to help others. Now, but I think that the key is, and the takeaway I have from that advice I got very early on, reinvest in your own health. The key to me is that we're all on our own health journey, and that we never get off that train. That whatever that journey looks like, whatever modalities work best for us, that we choose to use in our own life for our own healing, that we're always exploring and growing and supporting ourselves in a way that we can be our best selves, whatever that looks like. Principle number 3 for maintaining work-life balance and being, tending to ourselves so that we can be a good practitioner and do this work, is don't take their ticket. So when you're seeing clients, they often want to hand you it. I mean, this is a concept that I learned from a teacher of mine, Bob Duggan, who was one of the founders of MUIH, previously Thyself. And he would train his acupuncturists and also herbalists to not take the client's ticket. So the client comes in and says, I have this problem and I need you to fix it for me. If you take that ticket and you say, I'm going to fix that problem, then you now are responsible for fixing that client's problem. Now, this all happens not in this language, but it might happen just very subtly with a client saying, I have to lose weight by my daughter's wedding, which is in 2 months. And if you say, yes, you're going to lose that weight and I'm going to help you do it. Another way of saying that might be, that that is a definitely a worthwhile goal. And I'm not sure if you're going to meet that goal, but I can certainly work with you to explore tools and resources so that you are able to meet your goal. So, you always, in the realm of coaching, it's called building self efficacy. So, building self efficacy is affirming, in some ways, affirming the client's ability to meet their goals and to change their health via various behaviors. So, don't take the ticket. Don't promise to fix the client's problem. You can promise to be a partner with them in the journey of their fixing their own problem, of their making the changes they need to make, and you providing the resources and tools and education and recommendations so that they are able to do that. Um, what are signs that you're taking on other people's problems too much? So you might, this is my classic, like, are you thinking about your clients while you're taking a shower? Um, are you worrying that they're not going to get better? Are you worrying that they're not satisfied with their care? Do you reach out to your clients more than they reach out to you? Or maybe you promise more than you planned on. Maybe going into the consult, like you have an idea that at your initial consult, your client gets a one-page write-up, several handouts, and maybe a meal plan. Maybe that's your standard, you know, uh, documentation that you give. But for this client, you always kind of go above and beyond and you promise more than you typically would promise, which makes you have to do more work on the back end. Um, and that might be a sign that you're taking on the client's problems too much. Um, you don't want to care too much. I know that sounds weird, or maybe counterintuitive, but there's empathy, but there's being overly empathetic. So these are some signs that you may be taking on more than is healthy for you. Principle number 4 is the classic set good boundaries. Now, we have an informed consent that does set boundaries. It tells people maybe how we communicate or what our cancellation policy is, what our typical way of working with people. But don't expect that even if you write all these things in your informed consent, that you're not going to have to reinforce that 1, 2, 3, 4 multiple times. Even if you communicate these things of what works for you and doesn't work for you, you're probably going to have to communicate it again and again. And that's just, I would have that expectation from the get go because I would have to say in the early years, I always felt like I was doing something wrong when I had to keep telling clients, I'm like, am I not communicating this properly? But you can kind of use the analogy or the metaphor that the client is like a child who is going to be, you need to remind that child to bring their plates over when they're done eating dinner or put their plates in the dishwasher after they're done eating dinner, you know, maybe 15 times. Just depends. So that's not unreasonable. Um, a lot of times we healers are not great at setting boundaries. It's definitely taken me a long time to be a good boundary setter. It's a lot of practice. And people in your life are going to you're going to need to remind them. Types of boundaries that you want to set, how you like to be communicated with, how often you communicate outside the visit, the length of the visit, that you need forms filled out before the visit. You might need to set boundaries about what your scope is, what you can do or can't do. Those are all ways that you might have to set boundaries. Saying no to others is saying yes to yourself. So, I had a client that wrote me for a while, wrote me daily emails that were single spaced and would print 2 pages long, single spaced on my printer if I printed them off. And I told her one day, I said, so and so, if I read every single email you sent me, I would know more about you than my own husband. So You can choose to send me those emails, but you do have to know that I'm not going to read them. I will read 2 to 3 emails between visits. That might sound harsh, but that's just the way it is. I mean, you know, we're not being hired to, read that many emails. So, setting boundaries is important. The next principle number, let's see, I'm on number 5, is schedule it. So it's important to schedule your you time, your family time, whatever is important to you and whatever matters. I got into a habit last year of, I generally do the drop offs and pickups for school for my daughter. And I drop off at 8:30. I can get to the office by 9, and then I have to leave by like 2:30. So I will schedule between 9 and 2:30 on the days I do the pickups and drop offs. I got into the habit of not blocking a lunch break, and I would just grab a bite in between clients, which would sometimes make me run late, and really only give me about 10 minutes to eat. So a couple months ago, I realized this is a really bad habit I've gotten into. And again, these learnings that we have there, it's like once we learn the lesson, it's not like it's learned for life. We have to keep practicing it. So I really started putting lunch breaks into my calendar, which was awesome. And they're not always the same time every day, but they're in there. So I really like the concept from Stephen Covey. If you've heard this concept, it's like if you imagine all the activities that you have in a week are these stones, and they're going to fill up your jar, or maybe they're pebbles that are going to fill up your jar, your cup. And if you put all the little pebbles in first, you don't have space for the big stones. You have to put the big stones in first, and then you put the little stones in, and they'll fall in between the big stones. So what you have to decide for yourself are what are the big stones? Like what are the non-negotiables? And you might have a lot on your plate with working a full-time job, studying for the CNS exam, and getting your internship hours, being the primary caretaker of a child, or being the main person that cooks at home, whatever it is. Figure out what the big stones are first. So, maybe that is the working with a personal trainer. Maybe that is going for a walk in the morning. It could be any number of things. It doesn't matter, but schedule it. Schedule those things and don't move them. Maybe you have days or nights of the week that are off limit to work. And, on Saturdays or Fridays or whatever that day is, you don't open your email box. So it's important that we time block what's important to us and put it in the schedule. And my last principle for how to tend your health needs and maintain work-life balance is to build community. So we as healers are often working alone, and we need to build into our schedule, build into our time community. Now, through the mentorship program, we have this Facebook group. Some people love social media, some people hate it. Some people feel nourished by connecting with others online. Other people need face-to-face, whatever that looks like for you. Maybe you meet people through this group that you build relationship with, and you go out and get tea or coffee on a regular basis. I made a commitment to myself that I would go to at least one conference a year. Now in COVID, a lot of those conferences have gone online, which for me is not as nourishing as that in-person experience. I am looking forward to when conferences go in person again, because I really get my tank filled up by those in-person interactions. Other ways, I have friends from when I went through school and got my master's degree that I'm still friends with today, and we get together regularly for potlucks or hikes or whatever. So building community and having people you can go to when you need support is really important. I've also consulted with other professionals in my community when I feel like I need support. There's a psychotherapist I'll talk to when I have a really difficult client situation and I need to consult with her how to handle it. I've had clients who are suicidal, who've been abusive. I mean, you name it. So, when I've had clients with borderline personality disorder, and they're very difficult to work with. And it's hard to identify sometimes what's going on here, and I can't quite figure out why this client's so difficult to work with. So, it's important, I have a lawyer I consult with, I have a psychotherapist I'll consult with, and then I have friends and colleagues who are in this field who I will check in with when I have a difficult situation. So it's important that we build our community, both people who we have a mentor relationship with, people who we have a collegial relationship with, and then just other people that aren't even in the field, just when we need to let off some steam, go dancing, or do something fun. So those are my tips. I've been in practice since 2003, so this will mark my 18th year of clinical practice. And I can't quite believe that actually, now that I say that out loud, but I have definitely learned many of these lessons the hard way, and I continue to learn them today. This past year with COVID has been a difficult year for all of us to differing levels. I have not lost a loved one, and so it has not been as difficult for me as I know it has been for other people who I've come across. And yet our clients are struggling. And so we as practitioners, we are supporting people that have more struggles than they did 2 years ago, psycho-emotionally. And so it's important that we're thinking about all these things and tending to our needs. All right, everyone. Well, have a great rest of your day. This is Rebecca Snow from the Nutrition and Herbal Collective signing off. And if you want to reach out, send me an email, rebecca@rebeccasnow.com or rebecca@nutritionherbalcollective.com. Take care. Bye.